All right, so TikTok. It seems like this app just can't stay out of the headlines, can it? Nope.
It really can't. And this time it's serious. I mean, we're talking potential bans, court battles,
Yeah,
government intervention.
a whole lot of drama for was it like a 60-second video app?
Yeah, 60 seconds that have caused quite a stir, that's for sure.
So let's rewind a bit.
Okay?
For anyone who may have missed the latest plot twist, a federal appeals court just decided to uphold this law. This law that could force ByteDance, TikTok's parent company,
Right.
to basically sell off the app or get kicked out of the U.S. entirely.
Poof. Just like that.
Gone. So today, we're diving deep into this whole mess, trying to figure out, is TikTok really a threat? Or is this all a bit of an overreaction?
It's a good question. And one that's got a lot of folks, lawmakers, tech experts, everyday users scratching their heads.
Yeah. And it's not just about TikTok, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, this whole thing could set a precedent, right, for how governments all over the world start to deal with these social media giants.
Yeah, it's a big deal with big implications.
All right, so let's start with the elephant in the room, shall we?
Let's do it.
The whole national security thing.
Right. Front and center.
Lawmakers, both Democrats and Republicans, are pretty worried about TikTok's potential ties to the Chinese government.
Yeah. And it's not just like some random conspiracy theory, right?
Yeah.
There are genuine concerns about how data is being handled, especially when you've got a company with such close links to, well, a foreign government.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about potentially millions of Americans' data.
Uh-huh. And then there's the whole question of content manipulation, the algorithm.
Right. Like, are they controlling what Americans are seeing?
Could they? I mean, that's what lawmakers are worried about.
Yeah. And they're not exactly mincing words about it either.
Yeah. No, they are not. We've got some pretty strong statements. Like, remember that quote from Representative Troy Balderson? He called TikTok a, quote, surveillance tool.
Oh, yeah. Being used to spy on Americans and harvest highly personal data. Not exactly a glowing endorsement, is it?
Not quite. But hey, TikTok isn't just taking this lying down.
Oh, no. They're fighting back hard.
They're saying, hey, we don't manipulate content on behalf of the Chinese government.
Right. And they're arguing that if you ban the app entirely, you're basically silencing millions of American users.
Yeah, they're throwing the First Amendment right back at them like, hey, what about our freedom of speech?
That's a good point, though. I mean, a ban would affect, over 170 million Americans who use the apps? That's not a small number.
No, it's not. And a lot of those users, they rely on TikTok. It's how they express themselves, connect with each other.
Yeah, make a living even.
Exactly. So it's a pretty complicated situation.
It is. So
Yeah.
how does the First Amendment, legally, how does that actually play into all of this? Because the government isn't, directly censoring content on the app, right?
Well, yeah, it's not content-specific censorship, but the argument is that by banning the app, the government is essentially blocking access to a platform for communication and expression, cutting off that avenue entirely.
Ah, okay. So
It's a form of digital censorship.
yeah. So what did the appeals court, what was their take on that whole First Amendment argument? They sided with the government in the end, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. But it wasn't an easy decision. They even acknowledged the concerns about free speech, but they ultimately felt like the threat to national security outweighed those concerns.
So they're saying national security trumps free speech, essentially.
Pretty much.
Hmm.
They cited evidence that suggested the Chinese government could potentially pressure ByteDance to hand over user data or influence the content that Americans see. The whole algorithm manipulation thing.
Okay, so that brings up another tricky question, doesn't it? I mean, if the government can ban TikTok based on what some might call hypothetical risks, what's to stop them from going after other platforms? I mean, where does it end?
Well, that's exactly what free speech advocates are worried about. They're saying this sets a dangerous precedent. Like Patrick Toomey from the ACLU.
Oh, yeah, he's been pretty vocal about this whole thing.
Yeah, he's arguing that if the government can ban TikTok based on these, what he calls hypothetical risks, they could essentially target any platform they want.
So TikTok is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, huh? Trying to defend themselves against these accusations while also standing up for the rights of their American users.
Yeah. It's a tough spot to be in. And it's important to remember that the law, the one the appeals court upheld, it doesn't actually ban TikTok outright. It just gives the government the power to force ByteDance to divest, meaning they'd have to sell their stake in the app to an American company.
So it's like a forced corporate breakup.
Kinda, yeah. Like what happened with those big tech companies back in the day.
Right, right. So the government's trying to, address the security concerns without completely shutting the platform down.
Exactly. But even that, even a forced sale, it raises all sorts of questions about government overreach and interference in the tech industry.
Okay, so that's where we are. What's next? I mean, TikTok's not going down without a fight, are they?
No way. They've already announced they're going to appeal this thing all the way to the Supreme Court.
Wow, straight to the top. So if they decide to hear the case,
Well, then it's going to be a legal battle for the ages.
the Supreme Court weighing national security against free speech.
Yep. High stake.
And don't forget the election. This thing is a political hot potato.
Oh, for sure.
So no matter what happens, it's going to have huge implications.
Absolutely. This isn't just about TikTok anymore. It's about the future of online expression, the power dynamic between governments and these tech giants.
And speaking of power dynamics, we can't forget about the political angle here either. We've got President-elect Trump, who back in his first term, he tried to ban TikTok, right?
Yeah.
And then kind of softened his stance after meeting with, like, a billionaire investor in ByteDance.
It was a strange turn of events.
And now it seems like he's back to, wanting to crack down on the app.
Back on the warpath. And get this, he's actually telling people, vote for me if you want to save TikTok.
Wait, seriously? Like, vote for me and I'll save your favorite dance app?
Yeah, pretty much. It's hard to say what his strategy is there. Maybe appeal to younger voters?
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe he's trying to pressure ByteDance into, making some concessions. But whatever it is, it definitely shows how tangled up technology and politics have become.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got national security concerns, First Amendment debates, government overreach, and now a presidential election thrown into the mix. This is getting complicated.
It's like a political thriller, but in the tech world.
All right, before we jump into all the potential scenarios and what this could all mean, let's just recap real quick, make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay.
So, the appeals court upheld a law that could force ByteDance to sell TikTok. And now TikTok is taking that fight to the Supreme Court.
That's it in a nutshell.
And the big question is TikTok a genuine threat to national security? Or is this just the government trying to control what we see and do online?
The million-dollar question.
Yeah. And there are strong arguments on both sides. It's a really tricky situation.
It is, and honestly, the outcome of this whole thing could have ripple effects across the globe.
Okay, so what are the potential outcomes? What happens if the Supreme Court decides to hear the case?
Well, let's explore those possibilities right after a quick break.
Okay, so back to TikTok and the Supreme Court. If they do decide to take on this case, it's going to be huge, right?
Oh, yeah. Massive. A real legal showdown. I mean, they're going to have to weigh the government's national security claims against TikTok's, First Amendment arguments.
And try to predict all the potential fallout from their decision.
Yeah.
Especially with the election right around the corner. This thing is a political landmine.
It is, and whichever way they rule, it's going to send shockwaves. Like, let's say they side with the government, right? They uphold this divestment law that could basically give governments more control over social media platforms, not just in the U.S., but
globally. So other apps, websites, they could all find themselves in the same boat as TikTok.
It's a possibility, yeah, and a pretty unsettling one for a lot of people.
Okay, but let's flip it. What if the Supreme Court sides with TikTok? They strike down this law.
Well, that would be a huge win for free speech advocates. It would send a strong message that the government can't just limit access to online platforms based on,
vague national security concerns.
Right, vague concerns. They'd need to prove an actual clear and present danger.
That would be a game changer for TikTok, but also for other tech companies facing similar challenges.
For sure. It would set a very high bar for government intervention.
Okay, so those are the two big scenarios. But what if? What if the Supreme Court just says, we're not touching this?
Ah, the punt. Well, in that case, the appeals court ruling stands. ByteDance either sells TikTok or it gets banned in the U.S.
Game over for TikTok in America.
Yeah.
But honestly, there are bigger issues here, right?
Definitely. This isn't about one app anymore.
Yeah, it's about the future of the internet itself. Like, how much power should governments have? How do we balance security with freedom of speech? These are massive questions.
Huge. And they're not going away anytime soon. This whole TikTok situation has just blown them wide open. It's like we've opened this Pandora's box of questions about online regulation, data privacy.
Yeah, the power dynamics between governments and these tech companies.
Exactly. It's a whole new world, and we're all trying to figure out the rules.
And where do we fit into all of this? The everyday users scrolling through our feeds.
Well, first off, this whole thing highlights how important it is to be aware of how our data is being used,
Right.
who has access to it, because every time we use these platforms, we're basically making a deal.
It's like a trade-off, right? Data for access.
Exactly. We're giving up our data in exchange for, cat videos and dance challenges. But this case reminds us that that data has value and it can have real-world consequences.
Yeah, it's not just some abstract thing. It's our information, our privacy.
Right. And this situation is a wake-up call. We need to be more mindful of what we're sharing and who we're sharing it with.
I think it also shows how quickly things can change in the digital world. What seems like a niche issue today can become a global concern tomorrow. We got to stay informed, engaged.
Absolutely. Because these platforms, they become so powerful. They're not just for entertainment anymore. They're how we communicate, express ourselves, even organize politically.
And for a lot of people, especially younger generations, these platforms are their main source of news and information.
So that raises the question, how much control should governments have over these platforms? Where's the line between regulation and censorship?
Yeah,
Where is that line? Tough questions.
really tough. And there are no easy answers. But it's a conversation we have to have.
Absolutely. A conversation that's only going to get more important as technology keeps evolving.
So as we wait to see what happens with TikTok, let's remember that this isn't just about one app. This is about the future of the internet.
It's about figuring out how to navigate this new digital landscape, how to balance security and freedom, and how to make sure that technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
Okay, so what if, let's just say, TikTok does get banned in the US? Would that trigger a domino effect globally?
It's a real possibility. The U.S. often sets the trend, right, when it comes to tech regulation. So if they ban TikTok, other countries might follow suit. We've already seen India ban it, and other countries have voiced concerns.
And what about the impact on, the whole tech industry? Could this make companies more hesitant to innovate, to push boundaries, for fear of government intervention?
That's definitely a risk. If governments get too heavy-handed, it could stifle innovation, make companies afraid to take risks, and that would hurt everyone in the long run.
But then again, you could argue that we need more regulation, right? To protect user privacy, to fight misinformation, to make sure these platforms are being responsible.
Absolutely. It's a balancing act. We need rules, but they have to be smart rules. Rules that protect people without stifling progress.
So it's complicated.
It is. But this TikTok case, it's really brought these issues to the forefront. It's forced us to start having these tough conversations.
And it's not just about the big picture stuff. It's about real people, creators, users whose lives are being affected by this.
Yeah. There are millions of TikTok creators who rely on this platform, for their income, their creative outlet, their community. A ban would be devastating for them.
So what are they saying? How are they feeling about all of this?
A lot of fear, uncertainty, anger. They feel like they're caught in the middle of this geopolitical battle. They've built their careers on TikTok, and now it could all be taken away.
It's got to be incredibly stressful to
Yeah.
have your livelihood, your passion hanging in the balance like that.
Absolutely. And for a lot of them, it's not just about the money. TikTok is more than a job. It's a community, a place where they can express themselves, connect with people who share their interests.
So it's about losing a part of their identity, their social circle.
Exactly. And that's something we often forget in these discussions about national security and regulation. We need to remember that there are real people behind these apps, and their lives are being impacted by these decisions.
And it's not just creators, right? There are millions of regular TikTok users who rely on it for entertainment, news, connection.
It's become a part of their daily routine. And even if it's banned, it's not going to just disappear. People will find ways to access it through VPNs or whatever, but it'll make it harder, more inconvenient, and it could create a digital divide, between those who can get around the ban and those who can't.
It's like a digital speakeasy. You have to know the secret password to get in.
But that also makes you wonder, how effective can a ban really be in the age of the internet? Right. Information wants to be free, as they say. The internet is designed to route around obstacles. The more you try to block something, the more creative people get in finding ways to access it.
So maybe a ban isn't the best solution? What are the alternatives?
Well, some experts say we should focus on stronger data privacy regulations, making sure these platforms are transparent about how they collect and use our data.
So instead of trying to kill the whole app, we target the specific problems.
Exactly. Address the national security concerns without shutting down the whole platform. And there are models for this, like the EU's GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation.
Oh yeah, GDPR. That's been pretty influential in the data privacy world. But I've also heard some people say it's too complicated, too burdensome for companies.
There have been some criticisms, yeah. But it's also given individuals more control over their data, made companies more accountable. It's a trade-off.
Increased privacy and transparency, but maybe some extra costs and hurdles for companies.
Right. But it's a trade-off that a lot of people are willing to make. Because at the end of the day, innovation shouldn't come at the cost of our privacy and security.
Okay, so we've covered the legal battles, the political drama, the potential ripple effects, and the human stories behind all of this. It's a lot to take in.
It is. But I think it's important to remember that this TikTok case, it's just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Yeah, it's a symptom of this broader shift we're seeing in the digital world.
Right. Governments are trying to figure out how to regulate this new landscape, how to balance security and freedom, and we're all trying to figure out how to navigate it all.
It's a huge challenge, and we all have a role to play in shaping the future of the internet.
Absolutely. We can't just sit back and let things happen. We need to be informed, engaged, and vocal about the kind of digital world we want to live in.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the future of online expression in a world where governments are becoming more and more involved in regulating the internet.
Right. Are we headed towards a more controlled internet? What does that mean for freedom of speech, access to information, the open exchange of ideas that the internet was built on?
These are big questions, and they're not going away anytime soon.
No, they're not. And the answers will shape the digital landscape for generations to come. But before we dive into those questions, let's take a quick moment to gather our thoughts and come back ready to unpack the potential long-term consequences of this whole TikTok saga.
Okay, so we've really gone through it all, haven't we? Legal battles, political games, what this all means for everyday people. But let's step back for a minute and think about the really big picture here. What's the future of online expression looking like with governments around the world, wanting to have more and more control over the internet?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? It really feels like we're at this turning point, and the choices we're making right now, those are going to shape what the internet looks like for, I don't know, our kids, their kids. This whole TikTok thing, it's a wake-up call, This idea of the internet as this free speech haven, this open forum, it's fading.
Yeah, it's fading fast as governments are trying to figure out how to manage this massive, powerful space. And it's not just about national security anymore, right? We're talking data privacy, misinformation, the role of social media and politics, you name it. It's a tangled web.
And it feels like the stakes are, I don't know, higher than ever.
Yeah, definitely higher.
Yeah.
I mean, the decisions being made right now, they're going to decide if the internet stays this place for, open exchange and creativity, or if it becomes this fragmented,
controlled
space. And that's why it's so important that we're having these conversations, not just in government meetings or tech conferences, but, in our living rooms, online, everywhere. We need to be asking ourselves, what kind of internet do we actually want?
Right. Do we want one where governments are telling us what we can and can't use, what we can and can't see, how we can and can't talk to each other?
Or do we want to hold on to those original ideals?
Yeah.
An internet that gives power to individuals, where creativity thrives and information flows freely.
It's like a choice, a big one. It is. And we have to make it now.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into TikTok and everything it's unearthed, I want to leave you with this. The future of the internet, it's not set in stone. We're all writing it with the choices we make every day, with our voices, with our actions.
It's easy to sit back and just let things happen. But we can also be part of the conversation, demand more transparency, accountability, and fight for a digital world that reflects our values.
The power is in our hands, and now's the time to use it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the wild world of TikTok. It's a story that's far from over, so stay tuned and stay engaged. The future of the internet depends on it.